Good morning. Coming to you again this morning from my office, high atop the beautiful St. Mark's Towers, overlooking the massive construction on Interstate 83. I'm wondering if and when that construction might ever come to an end, but it has been interesting for me to watch that growth. Speaking to you from my office this morning on Wednesday morning, not recording the day before as I usually do. I do have a couple announcements before we begin our Bible study. One is that one of our members, Earl Lippert, passed away on Monday. Earl was involved with the men's ministry as much as he could be, though he had some serious health issues recently. He passed away on Monday at home, and his funeral service will be held here this Saturday. That will be July 25th. He will be, the service will be at 11 with a viewing at 10. That service will follow all the same protocol as we have in our worship services, which means everyone will be asked to wear a mask. We will observe social distancing as much as possible. We will have no singing, but there will be music. Also, Judy Leister's memorial service will be Friday, July 31st. And that service also will follow all that same coronavirus protocol, and that service will be at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Our gospel reading for this week is from Matthew, the 13th chapter. We've been in the 13th chapter of Matthew for several weeks now. This week, verses 31 through 33 and 44 through 52. And we'll talk a little bit about verses 34 through 43, the missing verses, when we get to that point in our discussion. I will read the passage for you, and then we'll get into some detail as to what this passage is all about. First, an introduction. Throughout Matthew's gospel, Jesus and his disciples proclaim the good news that the kingdom of heaven has come near. Here, Jesus offers several brief parables that explore the implications of this announcement for people's lives. The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 13th chapter. Jesus put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which someone found and hid. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one pearl of great value, he went and sold all that he had and bought it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught fish of every kind. When it was full, they drew it ashore, sat down, and put the good into baskets, but threw out the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come out and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Have you understood all this? They answered, Yes. And he said to them, Therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like the master of a household, who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. The Gospel of the Lord. We have 5 parables in this morning's reading. Actually, could be counted as 6 if you take the last verse about every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven. We could say there are 6 parables here out of about 8 different parables in the 13th chapter of Matthew. The last 2 weeks we have had more detailed parables in which Jesus then offered an explanation of what the parable was about. He offered his interpretation to the disciples, telling them that he spoke in parables, and this is what's verses 34 and 35. He spoke in parables to draw out the truly faithful, to speak to those who had a true interest in developing a faith in Jesus Christ. Those who hear and don't understand, those who don't take the time to learn from the parables, we might assume really are not interested in becoming followers of Jesus. And so these parables seem to be a way of Jesus separating the true followers from the merely hangers-on, if you will, those who are curious but not really interested in becoming faithful. The parables we have today offer a look at what we sometimes call the now but not yet nature of the gospel. This sense that the kingdom of heaven is here, the kingdom of heaven is active, but it is not yet fully realized. So the kingdom of heaven is now, but it is not yet fully realized. Similar to a seed that is planted, it is already planted, it is incubating, it is ready to grow, but it is not yet a plant. Yeast that is mixed in with flour takes time to raise the dough. A treasure or a pearl that are hidden that Jesus talks about today, they are there, but they are not found, they're not fully realized yet, even though they do exist and they are there. So the same is true of the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is a reality now, but it is not yet fully realized. Some of these kingdom parables are sort of like riddles, that it takes some thought, it takes some pondering, as I said last week, to see just what Jesus is talking about. And again, this is a way that Jesus separates the truly interested from those who are merely curious. These kingdom parables talk about the kingdom of heaven in the sense of God's reign, God's power, not necessarily a place, not heaven as a place that we often think of, but the kingdom of heaven being that place where God's reign is realized, where God's reign has power and authority. The first parable talks about a mustard seed. And if you recall, last week we heard about a bad seed that was planted in among the wheat. That bad seed was gathered up and burned once it matured, once the judgment day came. That bad seed was thrown into the fire. This week, the mustard seed, we might assume, is a good seed because Jesus uses it as an example of something that provides life and a place for life. And here Jesus talks to folks who are, again, familiar with agriculture, familiar with how things grow, people who would know about a mustard seed being very small, but how large that mustard seed can grow. And with these parables we have today, Jesus speaks to a diverse audience. We'll touch a little bit on what each of those different audiences might be, those different groups of people that Jesus talks to with these different examples, much as we might use different examples in different settings or with different people that we talk to. The mustard seed is sowed in the field, and so it is expected to grow. The field being a diverse, sort of talking about the kingdom of God as a diverse rule, a diverse reign. That field for God would include the whole world. And the smallest of seeds grows into the greatest of shrubs. That kingdom of heaven takes only a tiny foothold to grow. We know that from Jesus, from one man, how the kingdom of heaven, the gospel message, spread around the whole world. We often don't know what great effect our proclamation of the gospel might have, but it can be like this mustard seed that grows into the greatest of shrubs. It overtakes the garden. It becomes the most prominent in the world. And birds of the air make their nests in it. And here Jesus seems to be referring to a prophecy from Ezekiel, In Ezekiel chapter 17, verses 22 through 24, the prophet says, Thus says the Lord God, I myself will take a sprig from the top of a cedar. I will set it out. I will break off a tender one from the topmost of its young twigs. I myself will plant it on a high and lofty mountain. On the mountain height of Israel I will plant it, in order that it may produce boughs and bear fruit, and become a noble cedar. Under it every kind of bird will live. In the shade of its branches will nest winged creatures of every kind. All the trees of the field shall know that I am the Lord. I bring low the high tree, I make high the low tree. I dry up the green tree and make the dry tree flourish. I, the Lord, have spoken, I will accomplish it. So when Jesus talks about this mustard seed growing to be so great and provide space for birds, we have this prophecy from Ezekiel where the Lord himself talks about not a mustard seed, but a cedar tree growing and covering the earth, a noble cedar. And again, we have this analogy to how the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, has now covered the whole world and has grown from a tiny seed, if you will, 2,000 years ago to this mighty, mighty bush that covers the whole world. The idea of the now but not yet, we don't see the seeds at work until they sprout. We don't know what potential they have until they are fully grown. And, you know, I often in my compost have tomato seeds coming up from years before. Often not sure what kind of tomatoes they are, not sure what they will be, but I usually allow them to grow and usually end up with quite an abundance, usually of cherry tomatoes. But those seeds lie dormant in that compost pile for a long time. Then come spring, it starts to warm up, they start to sprout, and it is the same with the kingdom of heaven. It can seemingly lie dormant in our hearts and in our lives, and then at some point it begins to grow to where it becomes the great influence of our lives, and as we say, it bears fruit for the kingdom, it bears fruit for the Lord. And the next parable, Jesus talks about a woman. He talks about baking. And so, again, maybe reaching a different audience, not only speaking to men and not only speaking to farmers, but to talk about baking, to talk about the women in the audience. When he talks about yeast, later in chapter 16, verses 5 through 12, he'll talk about the yeast of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which is their teaching, which is their moral corruption, if you will, which is their wrong teaching against Jesus and against faith in Jesus. So here, where this yeast is a good thing, he shows later on that yeast can also be a bad thing if used improperly. And so it can be the same with our lives, that our lives can be a beautiful and wonderful example of the kingdom of heaven, or we can turn people against the kingdom of heaven by professing to be Christians, by professing to have faith, but living in a way that is not compatible with the way God would have us live. The woman mixed the yeast in with 3 measures of flour. And again, the literal translation is she hid the yeast in mixing it in. It was hidden. Again, much like this hidden kingdom of heaven that Jesus talked to us about. And 3 measures of flour would have been about 50 pounds of flour, would have made bread for about 100 people. And, I don't know a lot about baking, but I know that it doesn't take much yeast to leaven quite a bit of bread as the effect spreads and grows throughout the leavening. So we have this small amount of yeast. We have a small seed. but both produce an abundance. Much as the kingdom of heaven becomes small, it can be hidden, but it becomes grand and glorious. Again, like the parable of the weeds or the sower who sowed seeds in different types of soil, and that fell on the good soil produced 30, 60, or 100 times. We have this sense of the kingdom of heaven growing from something small and hidden to something that is grand and glorious. Then Jesus says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field which someone found and hid. The kingdom can seem hidden to us for now. We look at the world around us and we say, where is God? What is God doing in this world? And that can often make the kingdom seem hidden to us. But when we find it, we realize what a great value it is. When we see the kingdom of heaven at work, we realize what a great value that is. And with this example, Jesus doesn't necessarily talk about someone who was looking for a treasure, but someone who just happened to find a treasure, much like we receive God's grace. We don't earn it. We don't get it anyway, but by God's giving it. And so this idea of finding a hidden treasure is very much like us being given God's grace and finding God's grace in our lives. And when we realize how valuable that grace is, when we realize what a wonderful thing it is, we do what we have to do to have that in our lives. We buy the field. We give whatever is necessary to hold on to God's grace in our lives, because again, it is of such great value. And interesting that the owner of the field apparently didn't know that the treasure was there, because he sells the field to the one who found the treasure. And again, perhaps Jesus alluding to the fact that often we have God's grace in our lives. We have a wonderful treasure of many blessings in our lives, and yet we often don't realize it, that we would be willing to sell those blessings, not realizing the great value, the priceless value of this grace of God and the blessings that God has given us in our lives. And so, again, perhaps a warning to us or an exhortation to us to be aware of what we have, be aware of the great treasures that we already have, and not be too willing to give those up for whatever the world has to offer. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the... Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the merchant in search of fine pearls. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. On finding one of great value, he went and sold all he had and bought it. This time, this is a seeker. This is someone who is looking for something valuable. And so here, we have, again, a merchant, a different class of people, a different type of people. We have farmers now, we have women who are bakers, perhaps, we have homemakers, we have now a merchant. Jesus using different parables, different analogies to speak to different groups of people, again showing the diversity of the kingdom of heaven. This merchant, this seeker, finds a pearl of great value. Again, those seeking something in their lives, seeking something to give their lives meaning, seeking a sense of purpose, seeking love in their lives. They find that when they find God's grace, when they find the kingdom of heaven, it is that wonderful, valuable thing that they have been searching for. And so they are willing to do whatever they must in order to gain that kingdom of heaven, in order to be a part of that kingdom. again, for us to be aware of the value of what we have um, with God's grace in the kingdom of heaven. And now he talks to fishermen. The kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and caught every kind of fish. In this case, again, the all kinds of things is a literal translation, not just every kind of fish, but it caught all kinds of things, good things, bad things, indifferent things, like us. When the net of the kingdom of heaven is cast out into the world, it draws in all sorts of people. And then when it is full, and again, this might be compared to the harvest time of the other parables, it's drawn ashore, and the good put into the baskets like good wheat, and the bad thrown out like the bad weeds. Jesus talks about judgment, so it will be at the end of the age. Again, Jesus makes it clear that there will be judgment at the end of the age, but he also makes it clear that we are not the judges. He says the angels will come. These are like the reapers in the parable of the wheat and the weeds. The angels will come and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And once again, Jesus talks about the weeping and gnashing of teeth. I think God's grace is far greater than, well, in fact, I don't think God has any desire for punishment, much like a parent has no desire to punish their children. But sometimes discipline is necessary. And it's the same with the kingdom of heaven. It's the same with God. God's desire is that we would all know that kingdom. But Jesus talks about weeping and gnashing of teeth often enough that we have to understand that that is a reality as well. And so it's not a matter of I'm okay, you're okay, everything's wonderful, everything's fine, just live your life however you want. We need to live our lives as best we can in a way that we understand as being pleasing to God. We have plenty of guidelines in the scriptures. We also know that we will never perfectly do that. But we also know that God knows our heart, that Jesus judges by the heart. And so, we have Paul saying that when he did the things he didn't want to do, it was the sin that lived within him. Jesus recognizes that sinful nature within us, but he also recognizes that we do have some responsibility, I believe, to try and control that sinful nature, and to try and overcome that sinful nature as best we can. Of course, again, we will never be perfect, but God understands the desires of our heart. And if that desire is to know the kingdom of heaven, I think God understands our desire to know that. Possession includes responsibility. And so since we have this kingdom of heaven within us and around us, since we possess this kingdom of heaven, since we are given God's grace, we have some responsibility to not take that for granted, not simply assume that we are okay because we say we know Jesus and believe in him, but to truly live as we do, and again, to do what we can to live a godly life. Although I keep coming back to something that Martin Luther is said to have said at one point, that even to say we do our best is not proper, I guess, that because if we say we do our best, how do we know we really have? If we prayed 10 times a day, we could have prayed 20 times a day. If we help one old lady across the street, we could have helped 10 different people across the street. So it's hard to say, hard to know when we've actually done our best. So we do what we do. And as Luther said, sin boldly, but rely even more boldly on the love and grace of God. And that's pretty much where we stand with these kingdom parables. We know that we have responsibility. We know that there will be judgment, but again, we are not the judge. We don't even truly know the criteria by which God will judge, but it's not we who judge. I thought it was interesting when Jesus said, "Have you understood all this?" After all these parables and after how we talk about parables can be confusing, and they say, yes. I think Jesus might want to say, well, I don't think you really do. But they answer yes, they do, but still they don't understand them completely. If they did, they would have been all in with following Jesus, and we know that many of them weren't. So he talks about every scholar, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven, like a master of a household who brings out of his treasure what is new and what is old. The scholars who are trained for the kingdom of heaven, the scribes, are those who know the scriptures, those who know about God's love, and so we spread that news. We proclaim that news as best we can, and we bring out both new and old. We talk about the well-known facets of our faith. We talk about the God of the Old Testament in many cases, if you will, but we also talk about the new. We talk about the new thing God is doing in Jesus. I just want to share with you from the Augsburg commentary on the New Testament concerning this idea of being trained. Every disciple or every Christian teacher, trained or apprenticed for the kingdom of heaven, is like a householder who opens his cash box and produces both new and old coins. The order, new and old, suggests that disciples, understanding and following Jesus, the new, do not destroy the old, but use it, the law and prophets, in fresh ways. In this present context, however, old and new can be given even sharper content. The expectation of the coming of the Messiah to overthrow evil and establish the reign of God, promised by prophets and righteous ones, is old. Okay, so that expectation of the Messiah is the old. Jesus, in the parables of chapter 13, has taught the hiddenness and great power of God's rule in the present time, and the consequent delay of the destruction of evil until the close of the age, bringing with it the dread possibility that God's people may miss the coming of the kingdom as it approaches in Jesus' ministry. And this is new. So we have the old, the prophecy, the promise. We have the new, the coming of Jesus. But we also have the possibility that many will miss out on the importance of the new. Again, these parables reaching different groups of people, different examples Jesus uses to talk about the kingdom of heaven. The lectionary Bible studies speaks to this in a way that I think is very much very important for us, very much relates to our situation today. He says, the problem we face is how to communicate the uniqueness of the Christian faith in a pluralist secular society. The answer could lie with kingdom parables. The kingdom parables proclaim the gospel in an oblique form so as to draw out the seeker after truth. They are inoffensive little stories that serve to please the crowds, Blind the Pharisees, bore the Romans, but call out the seeker. In the end, the one who seeks finds. So let's get cracking and create some modern day parables that proclaim that God's eternal reign is about to burst in upon us. And so again, we will find ways to reach the diverse people around us today, much as Jesus did in his day. So the kingdom of heaven is like many different things, and perhaps you can offer some examples of what those things are. Let's close with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, and I hope to see you Sunday, either in person or virtually.